Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Brian Stutland, Chief Investment Officer at Equity Armor Investments. Brian, it's great to see you as always. And you noted something interesting that while the Nasdaq-100 is down nearly 1%, VOLQ is only up about 1%. What does that potentially mean for stocks?
Well, I think typically when you see the market go down as much as it has right now today, is you would see put buyers come in, get a little nervous about the market, try and buy a put option contract to hedge their portfolio. They just really haven't done that. In fact, it's been the opposite. What we're seeing really is hedgers take their insurance off and be willing to sort of get long the market down on these levels. So to some degree, that's maybe a little bit of a bullish sentiment in the market. It's also making, because option premiums have declined somewhat, it's actually making it somewhat attractive to buy a call if you want to play to the upside rather than actually just straight out own this market, because I don't think it's out of the question that a free fall in the market can happen, especially the Nasdaq, given Tesla earnings and whatnot, that we could have some trouble to the downside. So I just am looking to be a call buyer today rather than to own stocks.
Right. And Brian, technically the market really hasn't changed when you think about it from a fundamental perspective, but when you look at the core technicals, it still doesn't look that great.
Yeah, we really just haven't been able to get away from this sort of lower level around 11,000 here in the Nasdaq and move any significantly move to the upside. And the reason really has been the 10-year Treasury. That interest rates continue to tick higher. They're slowly just on the upward grind. That's been very difficult for Nasdaq and techie kind of growth stocks to sort of take hold and move to the upside, because typically those type of stocks like a flat interest rate environment to declining interest rate environment, and we just haven't gotten that.
Brian, what are your thoughts around the resignation of the UK Prime Minister around its budget fiasco? I did not think the market reaction was necessarily as volatile or as drastic as I thought it might have been. It seems as if almost the market's just used to these macro headlines and further disappointment.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to this, what basically the UK did was unwind everything that they tried to put in place because the market hated what they were trying to do. And so they basically took that trade off. So what does that mean? Well, what we're seeing really is people get out of US based things such as US bonds and the US stock market today, and a rotation back into the British pound, trying to unwind that whole trade. And I think that's putting some negative pressure here on the US markets in terms of the treasuries market, stock market today. And so I think we're seeing a little bit of that, and we'll see how that sort of plays out over the next few days. But you're right, it hasn't been total volatile anonymity. And that's basically why I think earlier today, like you just mentioned, VOLQ not really up that much given the sell-off in the market today, because I think traders are somewhat calm, taking some of their insurance off on the downside and willing to just kind of get long the market at these lower levels.
So UK politics is trickier than ours, if one can imagine. What happens now? I'm not sure how well you understand it, but are they kind of in a limbo in the UK right now?
Well, I mean, a little bit to some degree, but I don't think it takes that long for them to sort of, reappoint a new prime minister, let that go to vote. And obviously, I think as it gets closer to that, there probably will be some volatility in the market. And for that reason, that's why, I'm mentioning, hey, look to buy calls here that are somewhat cheap relative to how much the market is moving rather than to be long stocks. Like I'd rather buy a Nasdaq, future call option than be long the Nasdaq right now, for example, because I think, look, we have the UK decision that's going to need to play out with their parliament and who they're going to nominate next and who's going to actually be the prime minister. And then you also have, obviously, the US elections coming up and a Fed rate decision. So there's a lot on the table in November coming up. And using options right now, I think, is a way to play the market.
All right, Brian, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.